Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Garcia with News Talk 710 KURV. And joining me right now is Mcallen Mayor Jim Darling, and he's running again to become our mayor. Now, Mayor, thanks for being with us today. My first question for you is just to tell us a little bit about yourself. We want to get to know you.
Okay, Roxanne, thank you. Well, I'm 68 years old, and I grew up in Rochester, New York, and I moved after I got out of service. I stayed in Texas, went to Baylor, and I moved to the Valley in 1978 as an assistant city attorney. Within a couple of months, I was city attorney, and kind of my career has been with Mcallen ever since in 78, and had a little brief stop in Houston, but otherwise I really enjoyed it. Somehow I've been either city attorney, city council, city commissioner, or mayor for almost 40 years.
Now, how have you liked working with the city? This is before you became mayor, so you were city attorney for a long, long time. How was that like first?
That was exciting. You know, when I first got here, it was pretty exciting times with I remember the first really big issue, we sold the hospital, which was a big deal. We had to have a charter amendment election and those things. And then I was with the reorganization and the police brutality cases, reorganized the whole department, probably the only time that's ever happened with a department that size in the state. So early on, it was Mike Bettis used to call me a crisis junkie. I really liked that. Those kind of things. But besides those, there's been a lot of good things in Mcallen to be a part of. So it's been a really rewarding career.
So you became city attorney for many, many years, and then you just decided one day, I want to run for mayor. Now, walk us through that process.
Well, actually, in 2006, I left the city to become general counsel at Doctors Hospital. And within a couple of months, Jan Klink was retiring from District 6. And so Mayor Cortez said, hey, why don't you run for city commission? And you won't get an opponent or anything. Well, I did. And had two tough races, you know. And Pepe Cavasalavaca ran against me. He's a friend now. I put him on P&Z and those kind of things. And he's a great young civic leader. And at the end of I knew Richard was not going to run for mayor again, so I thought, okay, I've been involved in it this much, let's go and try to run for mayor, so I did. Ran unopposed.
You ran unopposed. So I'm saying you just, you skipped, so you didn't really work for city commission, so you just went for the bigger picture and you just ran for mayor. Yeah,
no, I went city commission 2 terms.
Okay. So
two elections.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't finish my second term, I ran for mayor.
Okay.
And first time in, they say 100 years, didn't have an opponent, that's the only way to run. Yeah.
So now you do have an opponent this time around. You have 2 other opponents. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I wanted to ask you also, as mayor of Mcallen, let people know why you want to run again, and what do you love about being Mcallen mayor?
Well, you know, I think I had a lot of experience, and one of the things I really enjoy is, even as a city attorney can introduce some ordinances, etc., but you can't, the big things it's harder to do, even as a commissioner. So I always appreciated the mayor kind of set the agenda a little bit, so there were things I've always wanted to do as mayor that I couldn't do before, and I think we've done some pretty significant things. And so some things are unfinished, and I would like to finish some of the things we started.
You just mentioned that as mayor, you've done some pretty significant things. Can you tell us what they have been? Well,
I mean, people aren't going to realize how significant this is, but when the city for years zoned property agricultural open space, so all the annexation, almost 3,000 acres was zoned AO, which means you couldn't do anything except grow crops on it without going through some regulatory process. And so I always thought the city was really reactive as opposed to proactive in their approach, waiting for the developer to tell you what they wanted to do. So I convinced the city to let the Planning and Zoning Commission go rezone all 3,000 acres so that if you had a multifamily or commercial or even a single family, you could buy empty parcel property and start your development and do the things that developers do without going through the process of trying to get the proper rezone. So I think that resulted in last year we had about $300 million on the tax rolls. We had, I don't know how many, 18 or 20 subdivisions filed. I think that helped spur some of that growth in Mcallen. The other one I always wanted to do was 311. You know, I don't have my phone here. So you're going to go 311 and really engages the community. So if you see a pothole, you can call it in. It gives the address, etc. If you want to get a hold of me, you go on. It has my name, you can give me a message, and I answer it immediately. And so I think we had 84,000 hits last year. So that's really engaging your community. Not only they're a part of it, but it's also ability for us to see what's going on, and they could have access to it from that standpoint. Some of the other things I wanted to do, for instance, I've always wanted to hire a professional investment counselor for we have almost about $225 to $250 million a year, and we never had a professional advisor. So I finally got them to do that. and we amended our investment policy. Just a little tiny tweak is going to probably make us between $600,000 and $800,000 more of safe investments. So I thought that was important. I wish I had done that 10 years ago. We'd have $8 or $10 million more. So she went on that. I always wanted to. We do a lot of off-budget charitable organizations and like chamber, and we never really review them very well. We do it at budget time, but it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes apiece. So I asked CBDG, Community Development Block Grant, who really go over agencies very closely for the federal government, if they do our agencies too. And so they did that this year, which is something I really wanted to do. So they're really looking at those. And I think last but not least, I wanted to our recycling program is very successful. It's the largest one and most comprehensive, but we do a terrible job. Yeah. Only 26% of the people use it. Half of them abuse it. They put garbage in the thing, so a truck has to go to the landfill instead of the recycling center. So I said, let's crack down on it, and let's make it much more efficient. And if people don't want to use it, that's fine, but we're not going to have a $100,000 truck stop every house and pick up an empty container, or worse, a container with garbage in it. So we're making that much more efficient. And so kind of hopefully taking that as a model of efficiency and what we really need to do, and use that for other things.
Right now, you just mentioned CDBG, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because now that CDBG, they're probably going to go out the door with this new Trump administration. Are you willing to take out some of the city coffers to help pay for some of the community programs that we have in Mcallen?
Well, I think we have to. There's no question about it. We did one where we need some drainage, for instance, and Pecan was kind of the dividing line. Everything south of Pecan was eligible for CBDG, and so we have a lot of drainage programs in area El Rancho and all over, kind of closer to between Expressway and Business 83, if you will. So we actually went to the county and said we want to create a tax increment reinvestment zone for the Expressway, so that when these new assets come on the Expressway, you take some of the incremental new taxes from the building, you get the county to participate, and their tax rate's higher than ours. So we're going to use some of those money to do drainage projects that would probably would have been over CBDG over a period of years, and try to accelerate that. So already we're kind of realizing that. I hope they don't do it. It's such a great program. We've done a lot of capital improvements in lower income neighborhoods, but then the charities we support with that really are game changers. I would think they would want to, if I was President Trump, and what some of the rhetoric I've heard him say, I would think you'd want to increase that as opposed to decrease it.
We're not going to get into politics right now, Mayor, but I also wanted to ask you, just because I have to, will the city under your administration, will you continue the annual Christmas parade? And if so, what lessons have you learned during the past couple that we've had?
Yes, we will. When I see the looks on the kids' faces, I think it's worth it. Last year we made about $50,000, so we actually made money on the parade. The year before, we got involved in the promotional business. We were kind of told we'd break even, and we didn't. There's a lot of reasons why, but so we said we're never going to get in the promotional business again. Number one. Number two, I actually wanted everybody to know what we lost, and so I had the staff present all the numbers. We even scrubbed it a little bit. I made them take out some past year assets that they had, and so I presented it. And so I remember this. I was on the stairs, and I said, "You guys, I told a couple of the city staffers, you need to explain what happened, because I can't. I wasn't the promoter." And they said, "Well, what did Enrique Iglesias cost?" And I couldn't remember. I said, "I don't know. It was around 300." I couldn't remember because it was built into the whole production, and that was a big deal. And then I said, "You have to ask the city attorney." And when they did, he said, "We can't do it." Well, I didn't know that was in the contract, and so I don't care if people knew. And I said, "Ask them," and they said no, they didn't. So we've probably been in a lawsuit on it, and so that happened. So somebody said, "Are you against the legislation?" No, I'm not at all. I think it's ridiculous. This year we had the Cowboys, and I think they bundled their three things. So I can't tell you what each individual Cowboy made either. But it seemed nobody. I don't know what Enrique Iglesias is, but nobody cared about the other. And that's not going to happen because we won't enter a contract. But if it prevents us from promoting something, which we don't have to worry about because we're not going to be promoters.
Yes, sir. The next question I have for you is: should a city auditor have the liberty to audit internally at will, or should they report to you or someone else before doing that job?
Well, they should report to the audit committee. And when this all happened, I went and hired outside counsel. I didn't make the decision to fire her. The audit committee did, but I respected what they did. And so when it got to be controversial, we hired an outside lawyer from Houston. She went and researched the law for us and said that they were perfectly within their guidelines to do that, to tell them what they can and cannot do. And that was the issue. That was plain and simple. about that. And so, yeah, I think that's permissible. Our outside auditors, if you take a look at our audits every year, say we cooperate completely with them. They have a right to look at whatever they want. But I mean, there are some internal things, probably way beyond this interview, they could say that was happening that they didn't think was appropriate. And I respected our 3 elected officials. You know, you had Scott Crane and Trey Pebley and Tony Aguirre. I respected their opinion and went to outside counsel to find out.
Yes, sir. Lastly, or almost lastly, now that voters said no to Proposition 1, you know, might know where I'm heading with this. Now that voters said no to Proposition 1, how or should the city of Mcallen help pay for the medical school?
You know, the medical school was right when I was running for mayor, and so the agreement at the time, well, let me start off with why there was an agreement at the time. The medical school under the, I'm trying to think, it was supposed to be in Harlingen, under the RAC, Regional Academic Center. And so we went in there, they said, we want to combine the universities into one university. We said, great, but we want to negotiate where the medical school is going to be, because it would have been 100% in Harlingen. That's what the law said. And so that was a negotiation to split the medical school between the 2 counties. One of the things they kept saying is, well, will you support it? And we thought, well, we think we already had. And that was kind of Harlingen saying, we gave the land, so we already did our thing. So the $2 million came up for Mcallen and the county and Mission and FAR.
This is while it was in Harlingen.
Yes, it's why in Hart. And so the negotiation was to change the law. And they kept saying, well, just go ahead and agree to the merger of the medical school and trust us. We'll do something about the medical school. We said, no, that has to come first. And so there was that pressure to come up with that. So Mayor Cortez was there, and the agreement was $2 million for Mcallen. Then when I got to be mayor, which was really interesting, before I got to be mayor, I sit in the back, and nobody recognized me, and I got to be mayor and said, come on up, Mayor, sit in the front. And I thought, I'm the same guy, you know, and so I understand that it's the position, not the person. But when I looked at that, I said, we got to put languages, even though it wasn't an enforceable contract, I want to put languages up to $2 million, because who knew? You know, and in fact, last 2 years, we're going to be $3 million down against sales tax this year. So we budgeted $1 million. I'm reaching out to, I've been in Cameron County with the judge, all 3 mayors of the large cities there, a couple of the community leaders saying, hey, you know, you guys need to help us step up, because the legislature is saying, we're not going to fund you. So I was trying to get that $1 million as leverage to get more money and go up, and I'm still going to do that, hopefully by the end of this week, early next week. So we're working on it. So my answer is, I think the medical school is a game changer. I think we need to do what we can do. I think the election, I didn't come out and support the election. I was kind of criticized for that, because I think there was a different way I would have approached it differently. I know what IGT transfers are. You know, and again, I worked for the hospital when all the Medicaid things came up in IGT transfers and those. So, and probably operated with the county, the indigent care program for 4 or 5 years. So I'm just saying there's other ways of doing it. I wish they would have done it that way. And I think we'd still have the support for the medical school we need to have. The other thing is that we had a kind of a vested interest in passing the district, because that would have eliminated our $2 million obligation. But I didn't feel comfortable doing that at that time.
Yes, sir. Now, I know it's been a tough interview. I know, but it's great. But lastly, so our viewers can...
That's why you can't do minute debates. So I've had people say, you know, you're wasting money. So I have to explain sales tax in a minute. I can't do that.
You can't do that. Well, luckily we have a little bit of time. But our last question for you, Mayor, is why should Mcallen voters vote for you as our next mayor?
Well, you know, I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of knowledge. I was president of the Regional Water Authority. I know water issues. I was president of the Council of Governments. I have a really good financial background. I was a bond lawyer for Jaworski, and I know city government a lot. But I think more importantly is I believe in building relationships, and that's how you get things done. And so I've worked hard to do that. When I was president of the Council of Governments, we created the Large City Coalition, first ever. So at least we're talking with each other. So the next step is let's be not only talking but building with each other. So I think I have a lot to offer. I have enough energy for 4 more years every day. I think if you keep up with me, that's good. And I think there's some things that we've started that I'd like to finish.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's Mcallen Mayor Jim Darling asking you to vote for him this coming May election. I'm Roxanne Garcia. Thanks again, Mayor Darling. You're listening to 710 KURV.